Hello, I'm Jim Daniels with Digital Badge Academy, and welcome to the third installment of our multi-part education series on digital credentialing program governance. In this session, we'll go another layer deeper by presenting the 5 phases of governance model development. And we'll also talk about 3 primary steps associated with each of those 5 phases. Now, if you haven't done so already, it's strongly recommended that you review parts 1 and 2. That will provide you with some much needed context for this session's topic. So just follow the link that's scrolling across right now, which will take you to Digital Badge Academy's website, where you will find parts 1 and parts 2. Now, let's jump straight into today's topic. Before we actually take a deep dive into each of these 5 phases, let's take a look at what those 5 phases actually consist of. So the first one is alignment. So in this phase, and this is going to be really where the primary focus is on developing that vision. In other words, what do you want this credentialing program to be in service of, and what kinds of business needs will it need to address? The second thing that comes along is the design phase. And this is where you're going to start to translate those goals and visions and your mission statement that all get settled up front in the alignment phase. This is where you're going to start to define that in more detail and actually start to establish some guardrails and some fences within which your program will be operating. Then you move into the build phase, and the sleeves get rolled up even further here. So this is where you're going to be taking a hard look at for instance, a buy versus build. Do you go out and invest in a commercially available platform to handle the issuing of your badges, or do you build something internally? How are you going to interface those steps and those processes with learning management systems? And there's a whole host of other things that you have to think about in the build phase. So in the deployment phase, this is where you really start to roll out the program to your target audience. That's going to include your issuers, your earners, and even your consumers. And again, there's a number of activities that have to take place here, and we'll dive into those in just a moment. And then finally, we have optimize. And optimize is where you're going to start looking at the ongoing process of how you refine and further improve your program. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And among them, and the most significant way, is to actually have measures of success in place and have a way of capturing feedback. All right, so now we'll start to dissect each of these 5 phases. And if we start with alignment, let's revisit what alignment is all about. So the primary focus here is on understanding the overarching goals and objectives of your digital badge program. So this will involve identifying who the key stakeholders are, and that could include program managers, badge issuers, earners, of course, business unit leads, educational institutions. It all depends on your organization and what the program is intended to be in service of. So through collaboration with these stakeholders and having discussions and careful analysis of the needs of this program, you'll be able to align the program's purpose with the needs and expectations of those stakeholders. And that's really key. And this step is going to really be what lays the foundation for the entire governance framework by ensuring that all those stakeholders share common understanding, as well as understanding what level of accountability that they have in upholding the program's mission and intended outcomes. So I mentioned there's 3 primary steps that are associated with each of these phases. If we look at the first step here under alignment, again, this is clearly articulating what those specific goals are going to be and really identifying those objectives. Are you looking to close skill gaps? Could it be in finding a way to enhance career opportunity for employees? Maybe there's a need to meet some type of or set of industry standards. Maybe you're looking for a way just to enhance the validation of skills or to improve organizational performance. A lot of things can come into play here when it comes down to defining the objectives. The second step in this is stakeholder identification, which you've heard that term come up quite a bit up to this point. So this is really, again, where you're going to have to make a hard decision on who your key stakeholders are, because they're going to have an active role up front in this process, so that the program is built and structured in a way that brings value and benefit to those stakeholders as well as to the business in general. So the third step here is needs assessment. And needs assessment is where you're going to be conducting a thorough analysis of what kinds of, for instance, skills and competencies are required within your business. And you'll be doing that hand in hand with your stakeholders. And again, that analysis is all dependent upon that sort of larger vision or what those objectives are. I'm using an example here of skills and competencies, but it could just as easily be some other set of objectives that you have in place. Regardless of that, this is where you're really going to have a need to pull together experts and gather the insights that are needed, and be able to build out an assessment that's going to inform the content and the structure of how your program is built. All right, so now we move into the second phase, and that is design. So the design phase will involve really translating everything that happened during the alignment phase into a structured governance model. So here you're going to actually get into the weeds and start defining specific roles and responsibilities of people that are going to be, for instance, directly involved with the actual credentialing program itself. There's going to be defining decision-making processes for each stakeholder group that's going to be involved in the program. So you're going to establish criteria for badge design and how badges get issued, and assessment processes. There could be quality standards that have to be developed, evidence requirements, and how metadata is structured. So there's quite a bit that can actually go into this process. And again, there are three primary steps. So the first step in this is credentialing strategy. So here's where you're going to create a clear and structured framework for your credentials. You'll be defining different levels of credentials, for instance. Maybe there's certificates, maybe there's skill badges, whatever, certification programs, whatever that may be. You'll also be specifying the criteria and learning outcomes for different levels, as an example. So that framework that you build around your credentialing strategy is really going to set the roadmap for how learners progress through your learning programs and through the credentialing pathways. The second step is content strategy. So this is really where you're going to focus on developing engaging and relevant content that aligns with your defined objectives and framework. It could mean not developing necessarily new content, but restructuring existing content. That's something else that could also be part of this. So this may involve getting into the weeds on things like video lectures, interactive simulations, case studies, how you structure your quizzes. It's really all about ensuring that there's a mix of formats that cater to the diverse learning styles and learning modes that you want to have within your organization. And then finally, we get into the technology strategy. So a good way to sum this up, in part at least, is will you follow a build or a buy strategy in terms of getting something in place that's going to allow you to actually create these credentials and get them issued. You also have to think about learning management systems and the integration between the part of this tech stack that's responsible for the configuration and issuing of the credentials, as well as where the learning itself takes place. And so the point of all of this is to make sure that you have an easy way for people to engage, and that the user experience, and this could be an earner or it could even be a credential issuer, but to make sure that that's optimized in a way that makes it user-friendly. Now we move to the build phase. And in the build phase, this is where you're going to put the design framework into action. So this is where you'll develop necessary tools, systems, and platforms to support the badge issuance, assessments, and even management. This may involve things like building an online platform to facilitate a badge application process that has downstream approval processes built into it. You may have to consider integrating with other technologies to facilitate secure data handling and verification. There may be things that you have to do to facilitate hosting of evidence, as an example. And it also involves how you create your training materials that are going to align to these credentials that are being developed as part of your credentialing strategy. So again, 3 primary steps really come into play here. And the first one is actually with your course development. So you want to make sure that you have a process in place that guides the creation of detailed course outlines. That includes learning objectives, topics, and assessments. So developing content based on instructional design principles and ensuring it's engaging and accessible. And this is where it gets really important that it's aligned with the framework. You want the credentials to be intrinsically linked with the actual learning process itself and the content that surrounds that. There's assessment creation. So designing valid and reliable assessments that truly measure a learner's understanding and application of the material. So you might use a variety of assessment types, such as quizzes, hands-on assignments, practical application projects, and other methods to evaluate different skills and capabilities. And then finally, we have credentialing structure. So this is more about how you design pathways that learners are going to follow that leads them to earning the different credentials. So there'll be the need to define prerequisites for each level that they may have to attain as part of the pathway. This could be completing specific courses or a set of courses. It could obviously involve achieving certain score thresholds on assessments. It's really all about mapping out a clear progression for learners to follow that's anchored by these credentials that they would earn incrementally along the way. Now we move into deployment. So in this phase, this is where you're going to launch your program to the target audience. It could involve rolling out the governance framework and the badge program itself to badge issuers as well as potential earners. There's communication strategy that's going to come into play in a substantial way during the deployment phase. So as you market your program's benefits to potential earners and employers, you'll actively engage those stakeholders that we've talked so much about and provide them with necessary resources and guidance that will help them navigate through the processes that are defined in the model. So this phase really marks the transition from planning and development to actual program execution. And once again, we can break this down into 3 general steps. The first is marketing and communication. You need to develop a marketing plan to raise awareness about your program. So highlighting its unique features, its benefits, and how it addresses organizational needs, individual learner needs, or maybe even industry needs. And you can utilize all sorts of channels, which can include social media, webinars, focused training, industry events. There's a lot of different ways. In the very early days, I would say within the first 2 years of IBM having launched their digital badging program, they raised awareness through industry events more than any other channel. And it was a huge, huge benefit for them to get their program established and build credibility and awareness around it. Then we have registration and enrollment. So creating user-friendly enrollment processes. This is really to ensure that learners can easily register for courses. If there are fee-based processes in place, making sure that those work correctly, and accessing the learning materials. So having this process streamlined is really, really important from an overall user experience standpoint, because ultimately the payoff at the end, besides the knowledge and the skills gained by the student, is that credential that they would earn. And so anything that goes wrong through the registration and enrollment process can really reflect poorly on the credentialing program itself. And then finally, we have support systems. And this may be one of the most important things to consider. So you really need a robust support system that is available for learners or earners of these credentials, as well as your issuers. It's all about having clear instructions in place, FAQs, contact details for technical and program-related queries, even consider setting up discussion forums and having support workflows in place. All of that is super, super important, particularly if it is a program that scales toward the larger side of things. And finally, we get to the last phase, and that's optimization. Digital credentialing programs and badging don't operate in a vacuum. You're part of a larger ecosystem, and these programs are living, breathing initiatives and need to be looked after on a continuous basis. And one of the main things that you have to be prepared for is setting measures of success and having a way to actually measure various key performance indicators and other aspects of your program. As the program operates and generates feedback, that allows you to continuously evaluate its effectiveness, as well as the responsiveness to stakeholder needs and alignment with the objectives that were established earlier in the upfront governance model work. So regularly reviewing key metrics, feedback from badge earners, managers, anyone else, and assessing the program's impact. That's really what it's all about. Based on these insights, that's going to allow you to make necessary adjustments to the governance framework, badge criteria, processes, communication strategies, and a host of other aspects of your program. And again, we can break this down into 3 primary steps. So we have data analysis. So this is collecting and analyzing data from all sorts of sources. This could include learner performance, engagement metrics, and feedback, using data analytics tools to gain insights into areas of improvement and success. Many of the commercial platform providers for digital credentialing actually have built-in analytics themselves, and that can be a huge value to helping you gain insight into how your program is performing. Then we look into feedback integration. So this is really gathering feedback from learners, instructors, and other stakeholders using surveys, focus groups, and even direct interactions to understand those individuals or those groups' experiences and suggestions that they may have for enhancement. And then finally, content refresh, another important one. So continuously updating and refining your content to keep it current and aligned with whatever the business needs dictate. This is going to ensure that your program remains valuable and up to date, which is especially important in rapidly evolving fields or where the skills are very fluid or where technology is driving rapid change. So there we have it. That's it for today's session. And if you want to learn more, I provided a range of different resources here that you can tap into. Again, I want to point out the Digital Badge Academy's newsletter that we publish every Thursday. It's free to sign up for, and there's a link here provided for you. We also have webcast and blog articles up on our Digital Badge Academy website that are free to watch and read. And we also have a LinkedIn page, which you can go out and become a member of. We're constantly posting out on LinkedIn. So that's another great source to get insights and information about digital credentialing and badging. Of course, we have our masterclass, over 10 hours of very in-depth training. So if you're looking for something more in-depth in the way of education, that is a great option. And then lastly, you can meet with us. You can schedule a free 30-minute consultation with us to learn more about what we can do to help your organization develop or improve on a digital credentialing program. And to do that, just email me directly at jim@digitalbadgeacademy.com.
Are you looking to launch a digital badging program or improve an existing one? Look no further than Digital Badge Academy. Our highly popular online masterclass will help you gain the skills and insights necessary to achieve success. Enroll now and start learning today.